Hi everyone, it's Mr. Cadell. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. Here we go. It's December. Sorry. I, every time I want to keep a straight face. I really hope you're doing well. We're in ecology now, and ecology is awesome because you went through all those dark days in the fall. You learned about all these biochemical pathways and the cartoons in the book, and you're like, how I don't even get this. How does it relevant to my life? And ecology is all about the study of organisms in their environment. Organisms, meaning big picture. We're not inside the cell. We're talking about big things, big organisms, how energy flows and matter recycles and all this great stuff. So it's much more tangible for kids. And spring is on the way. We always do this in the spring. Make sure that you have a blank piece of paper, or you're definitely going to have to draw during this time that we have together. In the bird book, we're here at 3.2. I'm going to ask you to read. There's an assignment up there. Some pages in here. There's lots of good, wow, I just skipped a bunch of pages, but there's lots of good stuff here on how energy flows through these ecosystems and how it all works. There's definitely some questions that I want you to answer. They're going to go over food webs. I'm not so interested in food webs so much, but more this trophic level diagram here, this pyramid looking thing, because it really shows the interactions of organisms with one another and how energy and matter are utilized in those systems. I don't want to give it away yet, what I was about to say. But anyway, there's just a lot of good stuff in here. So make sure you read it all. It's all going to be on your test. It's all super important in the big picture. But first, if this was a normal block day, what I would have you do is build this. And this is a glucose molecule. And the reason why I would want you to build this is because this is a molecule on which all life depends. It is the primary product, other than oxygen molecules, which diffuse out into our atmosphere and we utilize for cellular respiration. It's the primary molecule that's created in photosynthesis. And there's a ton of energy in here. There's 24 atoms. They're arranged in a certain way. If you notice up in the top right corner, if you were to build this, the carbon would be black, the oxygen would be blue, and the hydrogen would be white. The energy, as I've drawn this picture up here on the board with an arrow, the energy is stored right here in the bonds that exist between the atoms. This is where energy is stored, and this is what we try to harness in cellular respiration, is this energy right here. It's chemical potential energy. Essentially, it's sunlight that was used in the chloroplasts of plants or other organisms to grab all of these atoms from water and carbon dioxide, rearrange them, put them together like this, store that energy right there. Then we want to break this down in a stepwise, controlled fashion and harness that energy right there to phosphorylate an ADP to make ATP. ATP is our energy currency that we have. It doesn't last very long in the mitochondria or in the cells in which mitochondria reside. But it is the stuff that powers our legs to contract the muscles. It helps us to think. It helps our eyes to focus. It helps us to speak. It helps us to do everything. That's our energy currency. We get that energy from right here. So anyway, I'd like you to build this. And then the bigger picture is that you would then perform this equation, that you would understand that, like, literally you could break this down, take these very atoms in cellular respiration. Let's imagine over there on the left side at the bottom left corner of this slide and the left side of the equation, you take glucose, you take 6 oxygen molecules, you put them together, and then if you go to the right side of the equation, literally you just rearrange them to make carbon dioxide, water, and then energy is released. And that then is the energy that we use to try to create ATP in our bodies. It's fascinating and it's elegant, and what's wonderful is that if you actually just took the arrow on that, you flip the arrow around, the same equation, and you went from right to left, it would be photosynthesis. So cellular respiration, photosynthesis, they're backwards of one another, and definitely we'll get into this more in class. Well, here's another activity that I'd like you to do, and this is pretty hard to do. If you're just watching this video, if we're not doing this in class, go ahead and press pause and try just for 60 seconds, try to put stuff in place of these letters. What I mean are organisms, plants or animals, for instance, and the arrow means energy is flowing in that direction. For instance, if you look up at the top right corner, I is getting energy from H. So it is somehow, in most instances, it has consumed H, and I is getting the energy from H. So I'll be quiet. Just try for 60 seconds. What would you put in here? It's really hard, huh? Let's start with a movie like we do most lectures.
In every ecosystem, living things are linked by the food they eat and the energy they get from the food. These links taken together make up the food web. Food chains within these webs often involve predator and prey relationships. The grasslands of Serengeti National Park in Tanzania are home to a great diversity of animals, each dependent on the next for survival. Here, where the climate is dry and the soil is poor, grass collects energy from the sun and kicks off each food chain. Plant eaters like these gazelles feed on the grass, and in doing so, they help even more grass grow back in its place. The large number of plant-eating animals found in the Serengeti provides food for many predators. Each predator has its own techniques for hunting prey. Reaching speeds of more than 60 miles per hour, cheetahs are fast enough to run down gazelles. Lions aren't so fast and tend to sneak up on their prey with little warning. Hyenas can bring down animals more than 3 times their weight. One zebra yields plenty of food for a group. Most of the time, these predators work together, but in the end, they often compete with each other for the catch. Hyenas and cheetahs are fierce competitors. Not only do they steal each other's food, they also attack each other's cubs. In a pinch, these predators become clever scavengers.
You know, it's not easy out there in nature, and you can imagine all of the blood and the pain and the everything that goes on. So I want you to have a realistic idea of what's happening. When we look at these pretty cartoons and they're nice colors, and I drew something on the board, and you look at this picture on the screen, there's a lot that goes on there that isn't very pleasant. So be realistic here. State Standard 2.1a says you need to be able to analyze how energy flows through trophic levels. Remember, the primary source of energy right here is glucose created by the producers, which mostly are plants, and there's cyanobacteria and stuff as well. We call these guys the autotrophs, which means self-food, which means they're getting their nutrition. The producers are from inorganic carbon compounds. In this case, it's CO2, which they use in photosynthesis. They then rearrange those atoms and they create this thing. This is at the bottom of the food pyramid. And this pyramid right here is called a trophic level diagram. This here is a food web, and this is fine. This is similar to what you just did. And there's some good stuff on here. You can see the terms primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers on the screen. You can see the other terms, herbivores. These are things that eat plants. Omnivores, not really coyotes, they're more carnivorous, but like pigs and bears, those and humans, we eat both plants and animals. And usually up at the top, you just have strict carnivores, these tertiary. There's even quaternary consumers sometimes. In the ocean, there's a lot of like super long trophic level diagrams. All the decomposers are off to the side. They're going to decompose everything, and I'll show you in just a moment how I would represent this. Eventually, I'm going to have you draw this, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. Here's more what I'm interested in you knowing, and you know, I think this is important. Let's stop here. So go ahead, press pause, draw what I have on the board. Please make it big on your piece of paper. Matter is anything that takes up space and has mass. That's anything that's made out of atoms, and what a surprise, that's actually everything. This has matter too, this glucose molecule, and so does an organism. Let's say that we have a coyote that's eating a deer. There's mass here, or matter in the deer, and that is equal to energy, because the matter within the deer is just mostly covalently bound organic chemicals that have right here in these bonds stored chemical potential energy originally gotten from the sun. So it's true when someone says you either eat plants or you eat things that ate plants. And so the ultimate source of energy is from the sun, energy stored here, and eventually all these organisms, including the decomposers, are going to break that down, and they're going to try to harness that energy to create ATP for themselves. So when a coyote looks at a deer, it doesn't look at glucose molecules, or it doesn't think, boy, I'm going to eat that matter and it's going to become energy. It just says there's a massive meat there, and I'm going to consume that so that I'm not going to be hungry for the next few days. I'm going to share it with my family. Well, the two things that we need to talk about here are matter and energy, and I'm going to tell you that they're different when they go through these trophic level diagrams. So what I want you to do is I want you to essentially ruin the diagram by going like this. Draw a big circle right here. I call that ruining because I don't know, I'm perfectionist, I guess, with respect to the way things look. This is energy. Energy flows through these diagrams. And it first begins, I'm drawing a sun down here, it first begins as light energy from the sun. And it flows in this direction. One thing that you have to understand is that there is, there is a finite amount of energy in any ecosystem, and there has to be a constant new supply of light energy, or this whole thing breaks down. If the sun doesn't shine, all this stuff in the biological superstructure just breaks down. So this is what I get for doing this in December. So first of all, let me spell this correctly with a Y on the end of it. What I wanted to do was, and this is okay, but I don't want to make this into a circle. So I'm just gonna go like this, and that's fine. Energy flows. Okay, great. It's flowing from the bottom to the top of our little picture. But what I don't want you to be confused by is that it's not a cycle, because matter is a thing that cycles. Gosh, I thought I had this down. Matter recycles and energy flows. So this is fine. You can just write energy flows. It flows from the bottom to the top. You need a constant new supply of energy. And then it's going to be gone. And you can even write up here that it's lost as heat, essentially. So I'm okay with that, as long as you erase this side of the circle. Here's what I was trying to outline with the circle itself. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to go by the decomposers, and I'm actually going to connect the circle. And then you can write up here, matter cycles. And the idea with this is that matter is recycled. Any atom that you eat today, from any food item that you have, has been in the biological atomic chain for probably, in some cases, billions of years. The atoms that make up us came from things that we consumed, but then those things consumed other things, and those things consumed other things, and so on. And you have to imagine that these atoms are just recycled again and again and again. And then when you die, your form, your shell that you have, that you're residing in, is going to be recycled eventually, and it's going to be recycled to the dirt, essentially, probably. And then a plant is going to grow there 1,000 years later, 1 year later, and then an animal is going to eat that plant, and some of your atoms are going to be soaring over the Grand Canyon in the shape of a bird, and then that bird's going to die. And the point is, it's just a cycling process. Matter is definitely recycling. Some other little bits of information that you need to know is that there's a 10% rule, and what that applies to is with each level you go up in the trophic level diagram, only 10% of the energy that existed in the previous level actually makes it up here. 90% of that energy is lost, and it's lost as heat, just like it is out at the top here with the decomposers. 90% is lost as heat as you go from one step to the next in this level. Now, we could measure this through matter because matter is equaling energy. Get a different color here. So let's imagine that we took the hillside outside of the classroom here at Battle Mountain High School, and we killed all of the green things and we weighed them. We said, what's the mass or the matter that exists in the plants? And we said, well, that's 1,000 kilograms. Okay, that's awesome. So we weighed that. So if we then said, well, what about the herbivores, the little there's little chipmunks and voles and moles and these little guys and marmots out here that eat stuff, plants, material. If we were to kill all of them and weigh all of them, how much would they actually weigh? Well, this rule tells us that they would only weigh 100 kilograms. You know, I've seen predators come out here. I've seen hawks sitting on the telephone, the light poles. I see coyotes cruising these hillsides and stuff. If we were to kill all of our secondary consumers, by definition, how much would they weigh? Because matter is equaling energy. 10 kilograms. So let's go up to the top here. Let's imagine that if I saw a mountain lion out here and we killed the mountain lion, how much would it weigh? Well, a kilogram weighs about 2.2 pounds. And a mountain lion, let's say, is about 180 to 220 pounds. So that doesn't work, right? So what does this tell you? If this is only worth 2.2 pounds, and let's say a mountain lion weighs 220 pounds, do we see any mountain lions out here? Have there ever been a mountain lion out here? And the answer is, we might see them sometimes. And has there ever been one? Absolutely, I can probably guarantee you that. But there's not enough fuel at the bottom of this trophic level diagram with the autotrophs to power the existence of a mountain lion. A mountain lion would not be able to survive here because there just isn't enough fuel for it to survive. If it was 2 pounds, it could survive, but it's 220 pounds. So what you then have to do is, well, if there was a mountain lion here once, where else does it go? And my answer is, it goes to 100 of these hillsides. So 100 of these hillsides would be enough basically space and autotrophs, which then kick off this whole linear progression of this energy flowing through one of these ecosystems, these trophic level diagrams. You need 100 hillsides to sustain a mountain lion. 100 hillsides from this perspective of the plants, because they're going to kick off what else can be living there. So that's why people say, oh, mountain lions have a huge range. They can walk 20 miles in one night. Yes, there are mountain lions around here. And what they do is they cruise. They have 100 hillsides that they know they're going to go to over the next 3 or 4 days. And that's what they do. And they can never stick around anywhere for very long because they have to keep moving. Because if they pick off something like a coyote, that's it. They probably know there's no other coyotes here because this hillside can't sustain even one coyote. There must be 10 hillsides that could sustain one coyote. So if you ever see a predator, they're always on the move. And that's the reason why. I find that to be fascinating. Go ahead and press pause. Make sure that you have everything drawn here. Sorry about this garbage over here. Make sure you have everything drawn here and that you understand that matter recycles and an energy flows through ecosystems and trophic level diagrams. I'm going to be quiet for a moment. Well, I just have a couple movies here to help support this concept. So here we go.
Hi, I'm Mary Poffenroth, and I'm an adjunct professor of biology. Today, we're going to be talking about trophic structure. Trophic structure is essentially the feeding relationships among organisms in a community. These feeding relationships are essential to the hierarchy of how this community works. Let's start at the bottom with our producers. Producers are going to be the only ones that are able to harness the power of the sun's energy to make into glucose. These, of course, are going to be our autotrophs. As you move up the food chain towards that apex predator, you're seeing lots of different consumers past those producers. Our first level consumer is our primary consumers. These consumers are going to consume, well, the producers at the very bottom. Think of it kind of like a pyramid, going from the very large at the bottom to the very pinnacle at the top. We also have secondary, tertiary, and our quaternary or fourth level consumers. As you go up the food chain, you start to lose more and more energy. In fact, each trophic level that you increase, you lose 90% of the energy originally harnessed from the sun. So now, let's use a real-world example to illustrate our concept here. So we're going to start at the bottom with our producers. Let's use a sunflower. This sunflower is going to be eaten by a primary consumer. For example, we'll say a grasshopper. This grasshopper is then going to be eaten by a secondary consumer. Let's say a field mouse. That field mouse is then going to be eaten by a tertiary or third level consumer. Let's say a rattlesnake. And that rattlesnake can then be eaten by a quaternary or apex predator. In our example, the red-tailed hawk will do just fine. Trophic structure continues to drive evolution as prey become better adapted at avoiding predators, and those predators get better adapted to getting their prey. Thanks for watching.
A trophic level is a step in the food chain of an ecosystem. The organisms in the food chain are classified into their trophic level depending on their feeding behavior. The number of steps an organism is from the start of the food chain is a measure of its trophic level. So the first trophic level is the primary producers, the organisms which produce their own food, usually the green plants or algae. These organisms are also referred to as autotrophs. From the producers, the second trophic level is the herbivores, the organisms that eat the plants. These organisms are called the primary consumers. They are the first step when nutrients are consumed. Level 3 is carnivores, who eat herbivores. They are eating organisms from level 2, so they are the secondary consumers. Secondary consumers are followed by tertiary consumers. Level 4 is carnivores who eat other carnivores. Level 5 is the apex predators, the top of the food chain, where the organism isn't eaten by other animals. Decomposers are also considered to occupy their own trophic level. They break down dead animal and plant matter, also known as detritivores. These categories are not strictly defined, as many organisms feed on several trophic levels. For example, some carnivores also consume plant materials. Now let's look at the trophic levels in this community.
Okay, listen. So make sure you get this down. There's definitely work that I want you to do that relates to this. I guess I'll let you know if these are the assignments I'd like you to do today. Thanks for listening. I hope that you understand a little bit more how energy flows and matter recycles in trophic level diagrams and ecosystems. And make sure the next time you go outside, you take a look at a hillside or you see some organisms in a field or something, think about where they fit in this big biological superstructure. Thanks for watching.